First of all, it's a terrible misunderstanding where the martial arts originally came from. It didn't come from Japan, and it didn't come from Korea. And it only came partly from China. The man who introduced the martial arts is a man called Suma Chen. He was Grand Historian, Volume 1, Volume 2, 5000 BC. The other man who did that was Sun Tzu, who wrote the book, The Art of War. They say that Sun Tzu was also Confucius, okay? This is where the martial arts came from. The praying mantis system, which you think is Kung Fu, was 5,000 years ago. They had the praying mantis iron guys, they had the praying mantis chariots. So all of the Kung Fu that you think about didn't come from there. It came through the Khyber Pass, through India, Saladin, through Persia, through the Syrians, and the exchange of ideas and exchange of words. The known quote is that a monk by the name of Dharam brought the martial arts to the Buddhist monastery. Dharam was called the wall gazer. He sat and gazed at the wall for 15 years. So how did he teach the martial arts? The martial arts goes all the way back to Genghis Khan, to Timur Khan, to Mongol Khan. The Khans, the Mongols. The Mongols were wrestlers. They spent all their lives on horses. So that was what they used to do. They used to do grappling and wrestling. Wrestling was taking place in India. India, they wrestled to the death. It wasn't like it is today. So the martial art, the transition to martial arts, as you know it, came from Japan. As I know it, came from China. And if I really want to tell you, it came from Egypt. It came from Plato's. It came from Socrates. Plato wrote about the lost city of Atlantis. They were all warriors. Do me a favor. Go to the Egyptian Museum of Modern Art, or go to the Egyptian Museum and look at the hieroglyphics. You'll see Egyptians doing Zenkutsu Dachi, Kokutsu Dachi, Nekawashi Dachi, Shiko Dachi, the stances the Japanese do today. You go one step further. Go to the Mayans. Go to Guatemala. You'll see the same characters. Go to Venezuela. Go to the Aztec. Everything that you're looking at has already been done 1,000 years ago. One of the greatest black warriors was Shaka Zulu, Africa. Shaka Zulu created the Zulu nation. Prior to Shaka Zulu, the tribes would get at each other and throw spears at each other. They'd pick them up, throw them back and forth. Shaka said, no, we're going to do something different. He made it a sagi. He cut the spear down, made it shorter, made a big seal, and said, look, we're going to fight. So he used a technique called the horns. So with that, you get that. Toussaint in Trinidad, the Black Napoleon. Where did these guys learn all this? Clausewitz was the greatest military strategist. Wellington defeated Napoleon at Waterloo. And by that time, Napoleon was never defeated. Wellington created the box thing, okay? In other words, the box defense. And Wellington gets credit for it. Wellington stole that from Suma Chen. Suma Chen, they were the first, the Chinese were the first militarists. They wrote the first military war. While the people were living in furs and caves, the Chinese were wearing silk. That's how far they got. The Chinese created the crossbow. They invented it. They invented paper. They invented the compass. So this misunderstanding, what happens is that we use the term Kung Fu. Kung Fu is a proper term, but it means do something well. Kung Fu carpenter, Kung Fu that. There's Wushu, Mosu, Guosu. The Chinese martial arts came about not because of Bruce Lee, the flavor of it. What happened is a Chinese opera company from Taiwan came to the United States and was performing. What you people call forms and kata is Chinese opera. It's been done for centuries. The opera of the White Dragon, the opera of the Princes of the North. So all these tumbling and spinning, you see that. So what happened? Mao Zedong said, "Oh, that's a great propaganda vessel," because prior to that, Mao would not allow the martial arts. The same thing in China, same thing in the Soviet Union. They didn't allow it. So what happened? But this is called Chinese opera. So what we're looking at as the martial arts is not a relatively new. It's old. Sensei Kono was a jiu-jitsu. Sensei Kono created jiu-jitsu, brought jiu-jitsu back to Japan, and created judo, gentle wave. Sensei Yoshiba created hapkido. Sensei Yoshiba, so good example. Oak trees like this. Hurricane comes, it blows over. Bamboo comes, wind goes, it blows down. Wind goes by, the bamboo comes back up again. So when you fight and I block, I let the power go by, right? Do you understand the concept? So hapkido, aikido. Isn't this interesting? When you go to Mexico City, ever see a bullfight with a toreador? It's the same principle. The bull comes, toro, and he passes, does the Veronica. He makes the bull come by him. because we're Latinos. We're Spanish. We gave you Christianity, for God's sakes. We brought it to you. We brought our culture to you. So all of the cultures are interwoven. There's no one culture that says they're the sole proprietor. It's all over. What you have to do is research. Most martial artists do not have the time to research. So they read the comic books. They read these things, but they don't. Suma Chen, Volume 1, Volume 2, The Grand Historian. That goes back 5,000 years ago. Suma Chen disappointed the emperor. The emperor says, I'm going to kill you. Commit suicide. Suicide is not indicative to Japanese. And I'll tell you about Kwando, General Kwan. So Suma Chen said, Emperor, the Emperor Wu, I don't want to commit suicide. Please, let me write, because he was a grand historian. So the emperor says, fine, we make you a eunuch. They made Suma Chen a eunuch. You know what a eunuch is?
No.
Took off his testes and cut out his tongue. But he said he would give all that up to write the stories about China, about the Great War, the Warring States. Everything that we do unto others as do unto yourself. That's Confucius, that's Chinese. Do you hear me? Do unto others as do unto yourself. That's Chinese. The forms and the patterns and the katas that we did those for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. Call them rituals. Look at Shaka Zulu. Shaka Zulu was the greatest warrior in Africa. He ruled Africa for 65 years. That's a fact, whether you like it or you don't like it. He had spears, and the opposite time, they had guns, and they had rifles. And they said Shaka Zulu's people were blindly loyal, they were fanatics. Excuse me, what about samurais? What about Bushido? Samurai means to serve. One of the greatest warriors who I admire and respect was Miyamoto Musashi. Miyamoto Musashi was, I consider, one of the greatest samurais of all samurais. Miyamoto Musashi fought against Toyonaga. Toyonaga won. Musashi had assumed a different role. So Musashi let himself get old and decrepit because he was a threat. He was the greatest samurai, the greatest warrior. So he retired to the island. Guess what? Musashi's greatest book was The Art of War, Sun Tzu. Oh, The Art of War. Because what happens is that everything that we're looking at is the martial arts. The martial arts didn't start there. It started hundreds, thousands, and thousands of years ago. Men have been defending themselves and devising methods of combat, of mortal combat, of no combat. So karate, what is karate? Karate comes from the word kara, chun-fa, meaning fist. The calligraphy for karate is Chinese. Did you know that? The calligraphy for karate is Chinese. Isn't that interesting? And most Koreans' last names are Chinese. Oh, the Koreans are going to get mad at me for that. Because the Koreans and Chinese have been friends. The Japanese didn't like the Chinese didn't like the Japanese. The Japanese went to China. The first swords were made in China, not in Japan. They had 2 swords that were made in China, which were better. But the Japanese perfected it, okay? So all of these things that you talk about, getting back to the Tumu Khan, Kibo Khan, Mongol Khan, the great Khan, Mongol. He was Kublai Khan. He was by himself. He said, look, I don't like this, so I'm going to do this. So he grabbed all these people together. So he took knowledge from here and knowledge from here. They were the wrestlers because they were the horse people. They spent 90% of their life on horses. That's the Mongols. They conquered all of Europe. You want to go to Spain? Go to Spain. You'll see what they did in Spain. You'll see what they did in Italy. The Italians, the Pope bought them off. That was the Mongols, the great herd. The Golden Horde. They conquered everybody. But what they did, for amusement, they would wrestle. That's where you get the judo throws, the hip throws, the back throws, and so on throws. They also used their weapons. They fought from the horseback. So the katana was drawn this way as opposed to reverse it because it was very practical that way. Then they had a taichi, which is a long sword. So they used a long sword like that. The nagiata, the spear, which is now the woman's form, was used by the front troops. Okay? So everything that we look at as the martial arts didn't come from Japan, didn't come from Korea, didn't come from China. It was brought into the Middle East because China was traded. It was called the Khyber Pass. They came through there and they exchanged, like you and I are exchanging words now. You have some silk, I got some spices, I give you some spices, you give me some silk, and of course we sit down and we talk about this and that, we play Go, we play chess, we play all these little games, and then we start exchanging ideas. But you've got to realize that these warring nations warred. Everybody didn't like everybody. So, but where did Shaka Zulu learn how to fight? This is interesting. Never met a white man. He was one of the greatest warriors of all warriors. He ruled South Africa for 65 years. You know the Latin expression, "Itute Brutes." And you too, Brutus? Brutus stabbed Caesar. He was his best friend. Guess who killed Shaka Zulu? His brother. Because they talked to him, they told him all these things. But where did Shaka Zulu learn how to fight? Interesting. Where did Tulane learn how to fight? See, we're conducive, we're indicative of certain things. I'm Portuguese and Italian, okay? So my culture, I'm not Caucasian. We're Portuguese and Italian. We're a different culture. We were the first explorers. My culture were the first explorers. Da Gama, De Soto, Vasco da Gama, Ponce de Leon, Magellan, we circumvented the thing. So what you're doing is you're isolating. You cannot isolate it. If you read this lost city of Atlantis, what Plato wrote about, these were great warriors. Now, the Chinese did a thesis on pulse, 5,000 years ago. On pulse. You know what acupuncture is? You know what pressure points is? So every pressure point where you can take a pulse, if you hit that pressure point, what are you going to do? You're going to hurt it. You're going to slow it down, right? So they understood about the pressure points. What happened also, they had to live in a society with the animals and so on and whatnot. So they had to adapt to the society. It's a good thing. There's a tribe in Africa that takes buffalo dung and put it on their head. Unfortunately, the tsetse fly lays eggs in their eyelashes and they get sleeping sickness. They say, why did they do that? If you lived where there's a bunch of tigers and lions and you smell like a man, what's going to happen? Lion's tiger going to eat you, right? But if you smell like a tiger and a lion, they ain't going to eat you. Am I right or wrong? Does that make sense? So if you're living with buffaloes and elephants, you're not a buffalo or an elephant, but if you smell like an elephant, then the elephants ain't going to bother you. Does that make sense? So what they do, they had to take nature and adapt nature to their surroundings, how they learn to live. The same thing with fighting. What does an animal do? An animal doesn't fight head-on. It circles. It circles its prey. So by watching how the animals existed, man began to animate the animals. So they became the dragon, which is a mythical. They became the snake, became the lion, became the tiger, became the bear, became the praying mantis. Every system in the martial arts today has already been done. Now, you hear the Chinese use the term boxer. Boxer is an English term. You heard a term about the Boxer Rebellion? There's no Boxer Rebellion. The East Indian Import Company was putting opium into China. The Empress Dowager told us, says, look, we want you people to stop bringing this drugs into our country. So they had the Boxer Rebellion. There was no Boxer Rebellion. It's like me moving into your house and bringing drugs and selling drugs to all your people and taking that exploitation. So what happened, all the countries went down there and they beat China. They destroyed China, okay? Now, when the English come over and watch the Chinese doing this, they say, oh, by Jove, they're boxing. Chinese boxers. Erroneous, improper term. The Society of the White Eyebrow, the Society of the Purple Turban, the Society of the Yellow Turban, the Society of the Harmonious Fist. These were the societies, which you guys call Kung Fu, which is an improper term, called Wusu Mosu. So what happens when the Emperor Dowager said, hey, look, we're going to have a war, guys. These English are coming over, the French are coming over, the United States are coming over, they're going to shoot us. So she had no standing army, so she used the boxers. Well, you know the symptoms. You got a sword, you got a dao, you got a spear, and I got a gun. It's obvious who's going to win. Okay? So what happened? So all of the things that we're looking at, we're taking as public rhetoric and as Bible truth is not. There's a tremendous misdemeanor. Look at Saladin. Saladin was one of the greatest Persians. Look at the Assyrians. The Assyrians created the chariot. The Egyptians marched soldiers, infantry. The Assyrians used chariots. The Egyptians got a horse and said, hey man, look at it. That's a solid wheel. Let's cut it out, make it a little bit lighter. So the Egyptians went one step further. The Assyrians had one driver, the Egyptians had two, three, had four. One guy ran, two spearmen, two guys there. So we learned from each other the martial arts. So the martial arts is a way of life. So what happens is now, what we're doing now is because we're becoming so engrossed with Hollywood, with the TV, with the movies, so we're no longer recognizing for what it is. Look, only fight when you can win. If you put yourself in a winning position, you don't have to fight. Does that make sense? Okay? China built a wall. The wall was to keep the barbarians out. They didn't want nothing to do with them. They're isolated. They were the biggest races of all. They said, we don't want nothing to do with those people because those people they're ignorant, they're illiterate, we don't want nothing to do with them. So we'll build a wall, keep them around. So what happened is the trade. Through trade came exchange of ideas and cultures. Soccer. You play soccer, where did soccer come from? The Mayas, the Aztecs, the Incas were playing soccer. They played soccer. Oh my God. The Spanish come over and say, hey, that ain't a bad game, so they learned it. So soccer was introduced by the Mayas, not by the white man, by the Mayas. And were the Mayas white? Of course they weren't white. They were Mayas. So everything that we take credit for was already done 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago. Even the carrying of the sword, the Japanese sword. It's the katana, the taichi, the wakatashi. The taichi was a long sword because you rode on a horse. And it was all cavalry. And then they decided to get off the horse and fight on the ground. Well, that sword was too long. So they made a shorter sword. It's called a katana. Then they reversed the sword, because in the old days, the sword was carried with the edge down, the blade down. Then as they got older, they reversed it, came out this way. And then they became out the symbolic, the motion of the sword, the movement of the sword. The sword, and unfortunately, what again Caucasians don't understand, the sword is looked upon with great reverence. Not like you guys do. They throw the sword around. That's disrespectful. Totally disrespectful. The sword in Japan is looked upon with great reverence. It's like, and I'm not being against any of you Christians, but it's like some Christians look at the relic of a crucifixion, okay? And the crucifixion, they were crucifying people before Christ. Oh, what, I said something bad? No, that was the method of punishment. They were crucifying people. The Romans were crucifying them before Christ walked the face of the earth. That's how they killed people. And the Romans were gladiators. And then from the Aleutian, then from the city from Atlantis, from the Greeks, they became warriors. The Greeks were warriors. And what happened, they trained just to fight. They were the Spartans. Mount Olympus, the Olympics, where does it come from? From the Greeks. And they learned to fight with weapons and so on and whatnot. But these were all men who trained every single day. They were martial artists. Not martial arts in the sense we think. We think martial artists, the karate. No. Every country contributed to it. One country cannot say the exclusivity. Now we get down to Funakoshi. Funakoshi was a great Shotokan. Funakoshi was a small little man. Small little man. And his style means small. He created Shotokan. Yamaguchi created Gojudo. Matsuoyama created Kyokushinkai. Sensei Nakayama followed Sensei Funakoshi. So each one created. So now we have the difference. Says, well, I don't like this guy because he created his own system. What's wrong with that? It's an exchange of ideas. There is no system that I think is great. We all learned from each other. We all liked each other. Now in the old days, it was called ruse. Gojudo. This was a rule. Now, they kept things secret. Oh, kept secret. Well, let me give you an example. Does the Dallas Cowboys share their plans with the Redskins? Of course not. Do the Redskins share their plans with the Dallas Cowboys? Of course not. So the schools that developed the various styles kept their techniques to themselves, and only students in that school would share those techniques, share those ideas. So consequently, we have this we can't share. We can share our thoughts, but in the old days, it was very, very subtle, very, very subtle. Toyonaga, after the Great War, there was peace for 200 years. He outlawed the katana, outlawed the wakatashi, outlawed them. They took all the swords, melted them down, and made steel statues. You got to realize the Japans never seen the Caucasian, the white man, until Admiral Perry. Oh, tempura. As you know, tempura was introduced by the Portuguese Jesuits. Oh, I said a bad thing again, didn't I? The Jesuits showed them how to fry. And why did the Jesuits? Because the Jesuits were the money changers and the auditors and the accountants for the Japanese. The Jesuits were part of the Japan.
So in the end, are you saying that the history of the martial arts is very confusing and complex?
Yes, because before the plates divided, how did the American Indian come here? What does he look like? Does he look like me? No. What does he look like? He looks like Eurasian. Oh, where did he come from? Look at the indigenous tribes. They don't shave like me. Their skin is thing. They look Chinese, they look Japanese, they look Oriental. So before the plates divided, even the Straits of Gibraltar was like this, and it split. The earth split. So people changed because of environment, because of weather, because of food, because of fighting conditions, and so on. So they traveled. So as people themselves learned, when all over the world, they migrated. We don't have the exclusivity rights of anything. We all learned from each other. And the problem I see with martial arts is most people are not well read. And this information's available if you go to the library and look it up. It's all there in black and white. All the information I'm telling you about. The Egyptians, the Greeks, where did the Greeks go? The Greeks went to Egypt to study with the Egyptian priests. Socrates went there, Pythagoras went there, Plato went there. They went to Egypt. It's interesting. How do they make the pyramid? We can't even develop what they do, what they did thousands and thousands of years ago in Luxor and all these mines. We can't do it today. With all our ingenuity, we can't do it. So they must have been doing something right? Okay? So you say, well, the Egyptians are white. That's interesting. They don't look white. Okay? The known civilized culture at that time was China. But everybody thinks Chinese cook and wash clothes. See, and that's what infuriates me, okay? Because they don't give credit to what credit's due. The Portuguese were the first ones. They said, look, let's go explore the world.
So though you're saying that it seems like it's more spiritual, what you're saying, than it is...
Of course, of course, of course. If you choose to call him God, or call him Allah, or call him Jehovah, or call him Ford, it doesn't make anything. He's a supreme power, whether you like it or not. How does the heavens stay together? You know, atheists, when they become scientists, they start to look for God again. Because when the minute they start becoming atheists and they start becoming science, they realize that something is wrong here. Then they become closer. There's a spiritual connection with everything, and everything. Man basically is a warrior, okay? And because of his warring nature, he's aggressive. And some men are more aggressive than the others. The Mayas were very, very aggressive. Very aggressive. They did astrology. Mayas. Thousands and thousands of years ago. They're doing digs now in Guatemala. They're doing digs now in Peru. They're doing digs now all over. They're doing Mexico, in Culiacan, all the way that area. So all of this has already been documented.
Now, how are you defining martial arts? You're defining it more of combative, fighting?
No, not combative. No, that's foolish, combative. Anybody can fight. Martial arts is a spiritual thing. When you know how to fight, you don't have to fight. Am I right or wrong? Martial arts gives you self-esteem. What is self-esteem? Self-esteem, feeling good about yourself. If you like yourself, you're capable of liking someone else, right? You're a black man, I'm a white man. I'm happy with what I am. You're happy with what you are. Can you change yourself? No. Your mother and father determined what you were going to be. My mother and father determined what I was going to be. So why should I hate what I am? I have to be proud of what I am. Right or wrong. You guys say black is beautiful. I say white is right. What the hell's the difference? There's no difference. I'm proud of my parents. You're proud of your heritage. Okay? So you say, well, what happened? Well, when they brought you over here, they had to break your spirit. To put chains on your legs and chains on your arms, right? Then they put a big steel collar around your neck. It served no function. What the function served? It served you to lower your head. Kowtow. Because a man looks you straight in the eyes. So they think, we've got to break your spirit. Then they didn't allow you to use your names and so on and whatnot. So what they wanted to do is try to destroy your culture. They didn't destroy your culture. Okay? Here's a good example. And this, I'm going to get myself in trouble now, but I'm going to tell you anyway. It's a product called ganja. You know what ganja is? Ganja's weed. Ganja came about because in Jamaica, the Jamaicans were chopping the sugar cane and said, we ain't going to chop sugar cane no more. We're going to revolt. So they revolted. So the colonials said, ooh, what are we going to do something now? The Jamaican blacks ain't going to cut sugar cane no more. So the English colonists said, oh, we go back to India. We'll get Indian laborers. So they brought Indian laborers to Jamaica, and guess what the Indian laborers smoked? Ganja. Rastafarians smoke ganja. Okay? All of the cultures that we look at are all indicative to each other. We're all related. We're all brothers. We're all sisters. We may look a little different. We may eat a little different. We may dress a little different because of the environment, because of the conditions that are opposing us. The martial arts is not combative. The martial arts is a way of life. I like what about myself. I'm happy with what I am. Good, bad, or indifferent. I've been in martial arts since 1938. 38, yeah. And I'll tell you how I got into it, but that's another story. But I want to read. When I trained with my teacher, I said, wow, I wonder who his teacher was. I wasn't being... So I said, who was your teacher? Then who was your teacher? It's like a glass of water. I give you a full glass of water, right? And you take that full glass and you give it to your friend. You take half the water. So now it's a half a glass, right? Now he takes it, he divides it, it's a quarter of a glass, right? And down the road, all of a sudden down here, there's no more water, just a drop. Do you follow me? Do you understand? This is how knowledge is. So I don't want to drop no more. I want to go to the source. I want to know why you left. I'm not just being disrespectful to my teachers. I want to know who taught them and where did they learn it from? As opposed to, well, I created this system, I created that system. The more you read, the more doors that are opening and opening and opening. Look at Isis, look at Seth, look at Egyptian mythology. You start looking at Egyptian mythology, it's we call it very paganistic. You'll find a lot of Christianity symbols that we use in Christianity were already used in Egyptian mythology. Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. 3 in Isis, there's the 3. So we learned from each other. We learned through trial and error, and through the trial and error, the martial arts, as you know it, as I know it, developed. What helped it more than anything else was Hollywood, was the music, was the TV, all these things. You have to be able to separate fact from fiction. Good example. Now the Buddhist priests, because when you think of priests, and I'm not being disrespectful, you think of priests in the Christian sense. Very docile, helpful, etc. Well, the priests were fighters, were warriors. One of the greatest warriors in Japan was a Buddhist priest with the Nagayata. Great warrior. So the Buddhist priests were warriors too. So what happened, John Jones said, look, you better go up there and talk to those guys up there in that mountain because we want some of the rice. They ain't giving us enough rice. So they went up there and they talked to the Buddhist priest. Buddhist says, well, come back another day, we'll sit down, we'll have a meeting, talk. Then meanwhile, a couple of farmers went up there and said, look, they're sharecroppers. They're taking all the rice from us. We can't even eat. So they went to the Buddhist priest. So what do we do? It's okay. So they send this one guy up there. And he said, look, you got to give me some rice. Otherwise, I'm going to do some stuff. So he got a little angry, a little anxious with the Buddhist priest. The Buddhist priest defeated him. Very simple, with a staff. Because the Buddhist priest at that particular time, that part of the country, didn't carry anything. So he went back to his boss. He said, boss, well, did you get the rice? No, I didn't get the rice. Why didn't you get the rice? Well, that Buddhist priest up there had a dragon. Yeah, well, a dragon came up and jumped me on me and tore me up. So now that guy, John, tells Henry. He says, I'm going to send Henry up there. So Henry goes up there and he gets beat by the same guy. Now, he don't want to come back and tell the boss that he got beat by the same guy. So John and Henry say, he didn't have 1 dragon, he had 5 dragons. So John and Henry send up Charles. Charles says, well, we're going to fix this thing up. Charles goes up there and Charles got beat too. Now 3 guys got beat. So the boss says, hey, we got to stop this foolishness. So the boss comes up there, okay? Now all 3 of them got beat. Now the boss gets beat. So he don't want to tell the other 3, and the other 3 don't want to tell us. So they fabricate this big story about the dragons. And the dragons, you go up there, man, there's dragons up there, they're going to eat you up, they're going to do all that foolishness. So you have to be able to differentiate myth, mythology, fact from fiction. Because if this guy didn't know what he was doing, he went up there, he got beat. So what happens, the Buddhist priests carried a staff. They didn't carry a sword because they couldn't afford a sword. They carried a staff. Now you have the 5-hole monk, you have the 6-hole monk, you have the 8-hole monk. Different Buddhists. They'd shave their head and put a little incense on their head and burn it. and say in pain. So then, now, you see some of these kung fu movies, and they show Buddhist priests, what I object to. And they show a Buddhist priest being tempted by the flesh. In other words, women walking by with no clothes on and so on. I take issue with that. That it bothers, because I'm a Buddhist. I'm not a good one, but I'm a Buddhist. I'm a Nichiren Shoshu Buddhist. I'm a Japanese Buddhist. Okay, so if a man can sit down, pour gasoline over himself, which I don't do that, set himself on fire, do you think a girl walking by with no clothes on is going to accept him? Bother him? Of course not. So what they've done, they've taken this culture and they're Americanized and westernized. Okay? Sure, there's some bad priests. Sure, there's some good priests. But you cannot generalize. Now, what you guys call the nunchucks, okay? You know what the nunchucks are for? To separate the chaff from the wheat, the chaff from the rice. Because the samurai said, you guys can't carry no weapons. Because if you carry weapons, we're going to kill you. There was a totalitarian system that existed in Egypt, existed in Greece, existed in Spain, existed all over the world. There were the good guys and the bad guys. And the good guys said, you can't do this. So now, they had the nunchucks. The kama was to cut the rice. All of these weapons that we talk, with the exception of the katana, were all weapons of agriculture. So when the Japanese, so you got to realize, Okinawa is Okinawans. They're not Japanese. And Chinese, Taiwan are not Chinese, they're Taiwanese. Oh, you got to learn to differentiate. So the weapons that you think are conducive were created by the farm workers because the farmers were not allowed to carry swords. Only samurais carried swords. And only a samurai could carry 2 swords, not 1 sword. It was an honor system. It was power. Okay? Samurai means to serve. Let's get that cleaned up. Samurai means, if I'm my samurai, you're a shogun, I'm a samurai, I serve you. I serve you. I'm not equal with you. You are my lord and you are my master. Not master and chooser. But that's it. So samurai means to serve. There's a tremendous amount of confusion there. Ninjutsu, ninja. Another confusion about that. These were assassins to hide their face. Assassins will be used by the Chinese, by the Japanese, by the Greeks, by every culture there ever was. We all used assassins. We all used spies. Sun Tzu talks about this 5,000 years ago. Sun Tzu said we could have spies. Know thyself, know thy enemy, can beat him. If I know 100% about you, my chance of beating you 100%. If I only know 90% about you, my chance of 90% goes down, goes down, goes down. So now what I got to do, I got to find out how you eat, what kind of food you like, so on and so on. Then I can plan my attack. Does it make sense? It's all logic. So and we all understand fulcrum, how to move an object 3 or 4 times its weight and size by using the concept of fulcrum. And it's physics. You throw a punch, you throw a strike, block it, parry the punch, and counter. Nothing wrong with that. Did you ever see a sparrow attack a hawk? Mm-hmm. Huh? Okay? A little bird attacks the hawk. How does it? It drives the hawk crazy. Okay? So everything that we know has already been done. What we did, we emulated, we watched. We watched the tiger, we watched these animals, and so consequently, we became the tiger the way that we attacked. All of the martial arts came from a known civilization way before us, way before us. Atlantis, Assyria, the Middle East, China. And they came from China with the trade. We traded with China. Marco Polo brought pasta back to macaroni, back to Italy. Tomatoes came out of China. Garlic came out of China. To spices, because we exchange gold. There's only 2 types of cuisine, Chinese and Italian. That's the fact. Everything else is an offshoot of it. That's a fact. Look it up. So they contributed so much, but in the course of contributing, people became confused. My argument is, how did Shaka Zulu become the greatest warrior? How did Toussaint, the black Napoleon? Not because you're black, I could care less about that. But how did they learn? Where did they learn it from? Huh? How did Cochise? How did Geronimo? How about Sitting Bull? How about Colorado's Red Sleeves? They chased Sitting Bull all over the damn country. Couldn't even get him. They chased Geronimo all over the country. And they went in, and once they got him in jail, then they lied to him and did him all his other foolish things.
What's your theory on that?
I feel they were touched by the Great Spirit. And they say, oh, this guy's talking. I don't do dope. I never done drugs in my life. I never smoked marijuana, didn't inhale, never did it. I grew up in the ghetto. You call it ghetto. When I grew up, it was called the slums. I didn't play baseball. We had a stick and a can. We didn't play basketball because we didn't have no money. And we didn't play tennis because tennis was for the guys on the other side of the street, the rich people. No, it's a spiritual thing. We forget about learning from each other. We no longer share information, share knowledge, and that's our biggest problem. There's nothing wrong with the Japanese sharing with the Korean, Chinese, and so on and whatnot. They call themselves pure. What is pure? It's an almost impossible thing to define. Pure what? Pure karate? Pure martial arts? Where? They say, well, look at Egypt. Phenomenal civilization, phenomenal culture, phenomenal culture. How did it exist? Where did these thoughts come from? Where did these people learn how to think? You know, there's a saying, education's for the idle rich. Think about that, idle rich. Only the idle rich could afford an education and afford tutors. If I was an idle rich, I had to work in the fields. My father would say, did you plant? I said, no. He'd knock me on the side of my head. So only people who are wealthy could have money. All could have education, right? Wealthy people had money, wealthy people could have education. So we had poor people. Now, if you want to control any kind of a person, you keep them poor, no food, no education, and no morals, and take away their religion. Then what have you got? Drones. You've got control, right? What's the educate? If I educate you, you develop good hygienic habits, right? If I educate you, know what foods to eat, what foods not to eat. If I teach you morality, you become a better citizen, right? You're no longer stupid. Say, wait a minute, I don't think that's right. I don't want to work for 2 cents an hour. Then why should you hurt me? So what happens, we're sharing this knowledge. But knowledge is strength. Remember that. The more knowledge you have, the more stronger you are, the better you are. The less knowledge you have, the less strength you have, the less people can walk all over you. Do you understand what I'm saying? So knowledge is strength. Knowledge should be shared. I believe in sharing it. But say, who is the best style? There's no such thing. I think if the man doing what he believes in or what she believes in is good, then the style is great. Does that make sense? If I knock your style or criticize your style, then I'm showing you that I don't feel comfortable with myself. Right or wrong? I say, hey, you're a black man, I'm a white man. What's the problem? We have no problem. You share, I'll share my food with you. Share. Look, if I speak Swahili, you speak French. Well, you're speaking French and I'm speaking Swahili. We don't even understand what the hell's going on. So one of us has to break down to learn how the other one talks, right? So in the course of the breakdown, we exchange ideas. Hey, have you ever tried this little thing over here? It's a good spice. What about this? Well, you know, we did this and that. So I said, no, if you push me and I retreat, if you push me and I stand there like that, then we're matching strength against strength. So if you push me and I turn, what's going to happen? Your energy is going to defeat you, right or wrong? Does that make sense? If I punch you and you duck, my forward momentum will keep going, right or wrong? Right or wrong? Of course. It's all logic. It's logic. But it's already been done. It's been documented. In the course of the documentation, we no longer read anymore. We spend all our time now criticizing and becoming critical. And this is what I find is very, very wrong. The martial arts did not start. It started 5,000 years ago. It started with the grand historian. It started with documentation. Cleopatra ordered the second burning of the Alexandria Library. What do they do? Burn books. Burn books, you burn the education. People are stupid. Keep them stupid, they don't understand. You know, I say KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. Right? So consequently, there is no martial arts, I feel, is the greatest. They're all great. All great. Funakoshi was phenomenal. Small little man. Yamaguchi was great. Gojudo. Matsuyama Kyokushinkai, good. And this goes on and on and on and on, and great warriors. Kimo Khan, Bangu Khan, great. Saladin was great. Magellan was great. You think those guys didn't fight? Of course they fight. All those guys fight. So all of this is all part of the, you know, who's fighting? What's happening is that we get so confused Martial arts is a beautiful thing if you read it. And I've been studying it all my life, and guess what?